Hello, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Welcome to our living room slash studio slash kitchen,
Neighbor's house.
Happy
neighbor's
Friday.
house.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's very quiet where you are, Stephen. I
Yeah,
know.
it's my so I'm staying with my mother, but this is her friend's house, and they're in Florida, and they can't get back.
Stay as long as you can. We're going to give everybody a second to just get settled. Take a gander at what's on screen. A couple of these tips should make your viewing experience smooth. Get some water or otherwise.
Happy 4th of July, everyone, or 4th of July weekend.
Yeah, I can't believe it's July already. It's so wild.
I know.
We'll get started. I am Claire. I'm the director of marketing at Atlantic. So thrilled that you could all spend some time with us today, especially on a long weekend in the middle of summer. I know being outside calls, but being able to do this with all of you is really a pleasure. So thank you. Um, a couple of things to keep in mind in this hour. We're going to spend an hour together. You guys should be out of here by 5 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to play a couple of live tunes and we're going to play one demo. All of these things, of course, rely on the internet. There's only so much we can do to control the internet. Knock on wood, everything will be smooth sailing. If we have or encounter any issues along the way, we'll pause, try to solve quickly, and then get you guys out of here and enjoying your weekend by 5 o'clock. You guys can feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions for Stephen or Peter throughout the conversation that Neil's going to lead. Feel free to pop them in there. We'll kind of let them collect, and then we'll select a few and be able to ask a couple of questions towards the end of our hour together. Other than that, really just thank you for being here and enjoy. And Neil, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, great. Hi, everyone. For anybody that I don't know, I'm Neil Pepe. I'm the Artistic Director of the Atlantic, and welcome to our virtual series, Live with the Atlantic. This particular portion of the series is called Composer's Corner, and we couldn't be more thrilled and honored to have these two gentlemen, great composers, great musicians, who we worked with recently on This Ain't No Disco. So let me introduce them. Stephen Trask, first off. I was going to say, actually, well, I'll introduce him and then I'll tell a little bit about how Stephen and I met. But Stephen, most of you know, wrote Hedwig and the Angry Inch with John Cameron Mitchell, is a wonderful musician, composer. In addition to that, he's also written scores for lots of films, including The Station Agent, In Good Company, Admission, to name a few. The Little Fuckers, I thought that was a good one. Yes, and he played, when I met him, I think he was playing in the band Cheater. I met John Cameron Mitchell was doing a show at the Atlantic, and he said, I'm working on this show with this guy who's in this band, and it's called Hedwig and the Angry Inch. We might be interested in possibly starting it at the Atlantic. And I said, well, the music sounds so loud. I don't know if we can deal with it I don't know if the walls are thick enough and everything. But that was when I met Stephen in the alley of the Atlantic, and then had the great pleasure of going to see the show at Jane Street later on. So welcome, Stephen. And then Peter Yanowitz, who I met through Stephen, is an amazing musician, songwriter. He was the drummer with the Wallflowers, played with the band Morningwood, and lots of other amazing, amazing rock and roll bands. Great composer in his own right. He's currently in a band called, do I have this right, Peter? Princess Goes to the Butterfly Museum.
That's
And
it.
psyched about that. And he's the co-composer with Stephen of This Ain't No Disco. So welcome, guys. It's a thrill to have you here with the Atlantic on this Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. My first question for you guys is, how did the two of you meet? And how did that come about?
Should I start, Stephen?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a steam room, and we met actually kind of in an awesome way. You remember the band Hanson, the three brothers, Mbop Hanson guys. They host a songwriting retreat. They did for many years, and I'm not sure they still do, but they invite a lot of songwriters out to their compound out in outside of Tulsa, and everybody just sort of gets together it's based on a European version of this songwriting retreat. They wanted to recreate it here. They called theirs, the Hansons called theirs the Fool's Banquet. And both Stephen and I got independently invited one year, more than 10 years ago. And we're lucky enough to get put in a room together one day. It's a great, it was a great weekend.
Let me interrupt because I'll just say it wasn't luck. We hung out all week. Peter and I were the ones that hung out the most and the latest. And we kept not being assigned to the same group. And so we actually, on the last day, we demanded it.
And then from that meeting, you ended up going on and deciding to start working together on a variety of projects. Is that right?
Yeah. I had been asked to write a musical based on clue lists, and I knew I didn't want to do it alone. And I wasn't really exactly sure how I was going to find the right collaborator. And then we hung out and then wrote together, and I was like, well, that's the guy, and asked him, and he was in. I mean, it was just one of those things where, like, I knew I couldn't write it by myself.
That's great. And both of you, correct me if I'm wrong, both of you you've both been sort of in your own right really successful rock and roll musicians and obviously composers. And Peter, was this the time that you were sort of just making your way into composition, or you had been writing songs for quite a long time as a rock and roll composer, but then were starting to think about musical stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started out as a drummer, which is, the coolest instrument to play, but it also doesn't get the most respect as far as, drummer jokes, and everybody loves to pick on the drummer, but drummers know what we are. But after I had played in the Wallflowers, I met Natalie Merchant, and she sort of convinced me to quit the Wallflowers and move to New York and start to work with her. And that kind of became the beginning of me writing, because Natalie and I were living together upstate, and we had a little studio in our house, and every night we'd just go in there and write. And for me, it was the first time I was able to see how songs were written, because in the Wallflowers, I was just the drummer. And even though I would help creatively, it wasn't until I was working with Natalie that I saw her writing process. And after that experience, I was like, I think I can do this. I picked up a lot of stuff from her. And then I started a band called Morningwood and switched to bass, and that represented my first songs. And that was kind of maybe a couple years later. So after that, I met Steven. So I was a new writer, but I went to this, and I was always a band person. I came from the rock and roll world more than the theater world, 100%. And when Steven and I met, we wrote a song one day, and I just felt like I'd found my songwriting brother. We were finishing each other's sentences musically and not musically, and giving each other melodies. And it was just an incredible day of writing with him. When I got back to New York, he called me and asked me if I had ever thought about writing for the theater. And I think I lied and said, yeah, and immediately had the shit scared out of me. And I found that, anytime you get that scared about something, there's usually something to it. But no, Steven invited me into this theater world, and I'm so grateful for that. But it wasn't something I'd thought a lot about, but I had, obviously, my mom, I owe it to my mom. She's dragged me to the theater forever, and I've always loved the theater and grew up with, all the great cast albums being played in my house and stuff. So
that's great. And Steven, I'm going to ask you more too about your getting into composition, but we thought to kick it off that maybe we would ask you to play a song. And then we're going to have some other songs coming up, which will be really, really fun. So, Stephen, you want to introduce what song you're going to play for us right now?
All right, I'm going to play 15 Minutes Later, which is it's a song from This Ain't No Disco, which we did at the Atlantic, and it's the Act 2 opener when one of our heroes, Chad, finds himself after scaling great heights and falling at the kind of lowest point in his life, even lower than when he ran away from home and first started turning tricks, because now he doesn't want to be living the life he's living.
Great.
A good description?
Yeah, perfect. Whenever you're ready.
I'm gonna take that off. It's 15 minutes later. That's where my story ends. Every day I wake up, I think, bye-bye money, bye-bye friends. She moves so fucking quick, got me hypnotized. I fell for every trick, I hadn't realized that she was just a user, and I was hers to use. Now baby, I'm a loser, with nothing left to lose, with nothing left to lose. It's 15 minutes later. Boy, what a time you had. Now you're turning tricks with men, old enough to be your dad. You're that kid who fantasized without finding something real. Real world's now before your eyes. Tell me, how does it feel? Yeah, if you had a pair, I wouldn't want to wear your shoes. Yeah, baby, I'm a loser, with nothing left to lose, with nothing left to lose. It's 15 minutes later. I'm out here on the lam, all alone and desolated. Maybe this is who I am. So hung up on making it, don't try to disavow. You knew you were faking it, and you did it anyhow. I didn't need to read the signs, I could have followed all the clues. Now baby, I'm a loser, with nothing left to lose, with nothing left to lose. There's nothing left, there's nothing left, there's nothing left to lose.
Awesome. Yay.
Nice. Loud.
What'd you say?
Sounded great.
Sounded great. Excellent. And Stephen, as we talk, turn your mic up a little bit now that we're just talking. Before I want to get into This Ain't No Disco in a sec, but before we get into This Ain't No Disco and your guys' collaboration, Stephen, your first real outing in the theater was Hedwig, right? And you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into This Ain't No Disco?
Sure. How's this mic level?
That's good. That's great. That's
I
awesome.
I could even do this. How's that?
Yeah. You could probably even sit back a little bit. That's great. Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Wait, what am I talking about?
Oh, just before we get into This Ain't No Disco, just your first real outing in musical theater, it was Hedwig, right?
Yeah, I actually did. I did a movie musical in college in my senior year. I wrote songs for a musical that Miguel Arteta directed as his senior thesis film. And
Awesome.
that was my first experience writing a bunch of, like, I think it was like, I think I wrote 4 songs for that, maybe 5.
That was at Wesleyan, right?
It was at Wesleyan, and it, it got like awards at the Berlin Film Festival and a Student Academy Award, and it was, it was an encouragement that musicals were out there for me when I was ready, and I just thought that my band would make it first. So, so I kind of knew I was looking for something, and John knew he was trying to find a composer to work with a band, so that he could do a band on stage musical. And we were just kind of both looking for the same thing. It's kind of like when I think Peter and I were both looking for something when we met, and John and I were looking for something, and we just kind of found it in each other. And it was a very chance meeting, and we kept on accidentally hanging out together until we started working. That was an entirely different process, because I was very full of myself, and maybe it wasn't a different process, I don't know. So, but it felt like a different process. Like I hadn't been slapped down by the world, and the main thing I knew was that as we were developing it and we started to get characters together, that we would workshop those characters so that things felt real. Because I'm very, I like process, and if everything exists on the page, it's no good. And we started off with a show where it was just about a rock musician, and then partway into, it might have been actually even a year into working together, we invented the Hedwig character to be an ex-lover of this rock musician. And she was not originally intended, but I happened to be working at a club called Squeezebox, where I backed up drag queens every night with a 4-piece rock band, half of which was Cheater, me and Jack Steeb. And so part of encouraging John to, when we started talking about this female character, part of encouraging him to turn it into a drag character was because I knew I could book the gig and we could start getting it out there. And then it just kind of took off and became this very raucous club night that was too loud for people that were looking for sit-down theater, but we didn't care. And the real life was very Hedwig, where like we'd get these gigs at Fez under Time Cafe, and they really didn't want us. So they would always give us the third set, which was a non-existent set. So they were doing their Burt Bacharach tribute night one night, and they had all these all-stars. They had Debbie Harry, and they had Jay Mascis, and all these great artists were there to pay tribute to Burt Bacharach. And they had the 2 slots, the 10 o'clock and the 12:30. And they're like, but we can give you a 2 o'clock slot or whatever. It was just like ridiculous hour. And we're backstage exhausted because it's the middle of the night. And all these rock stars are pushing past us, and we're like up against the ice machine, and we go out and do these shows. And then we developed this thing where eventually we just didn't need Tommy. We didn't need the rock star character. Just Hedwig kept on developing in these kinds of environments. And then, some theaters were just like, they didn't like the subject matter. They didn't like the rock music. Some theaters were like, I'm interested in this, but we can't put it in our theater because it's just too loud, like your theater. So for one reason or another, every single theater we had developed something that was not a good fit for any existing theater.
Well, no, and it turned into something spectacular, not only at the Jane Street, but then moving to Broadway and everything else. So I want to segue. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to bring Peter into this because I want to talk a little bit about, and it's interesting, the club, you're talking about clubs and rock and roll, because there's something extraordinary about when rock and roll is fused with theater. And then this idea of also clubs and the sort of New York scene coming into it. So both of you talk a little bit about the genesis of where This Ain't No Disco came from, how that started, your interest in it, how you guys got involved in it. I think the first time I experienced was at the workshop that you did at New York State in film. But tell me how that got started.
Why don't you start?
You want me to start? So I was asked to look at this film 54 and think about making it into a musical. And I didn't think there was a musical there. But I loved the idea of doing something about Studio 54 or set at Studio 54, but a different story. And there's young up and comer and who's a busboy, and I mean, and there's a singer, but those are characters that would populate any nightclub. So that, which is what made it interesting to us. So the connections are vague to that movie, but it was so we're trying to put together a team for that, and oh, you know what? Peter and I had worked on Clueless for a long time through different book writers, and we had written multiple versions of the score, thrown songs out, wrote new stuff, and then the producer we were working with lost the rights. Stopped making the rights payments, and Amy Heckerling took her ball and went home, and because she had her own idea of what she wanted to do. I say that with no resentment. That's what happened. So, but it was very upsetting for us because we had really poured our soul into multiple versions of this thing. We were trying to get it going again, and then it just kind of disappeared. And I didn't want to. Somebody real came on board on the 54 thing. He's like, okay, now this is a real thing. I'm going to call Peter, because I didn't think we could write in a whole nother musical together again and have the rug pulled out from under us at the very end. We knew it. I knew it needed to see the light of day. So we hadn't worked. There was no work had started, and then we just kind of started. I'll say this: we were working with Rick Ellis. So it was Rick who came on board, and then I was like, okay, this is real. And Rick had this idea of what was it, like 17th century-ish stuff. So our beginning on this project was adapting. Who was it? Pope?
Hogarth.
No, but the poems we were adapting.
Oh, William Blake.
William Blake. So
Nice.
we liked the idea of being able to do elevated language because there was this old church kind of thing, and I don't know, we just wanted to be able to do that. So we started setting William Blake poems to music and sending them back and forth to each other. That was the very beginning of writing this.
And both of you guys, Peter, did you know a decent amount about Studio 54? Had you ever been there, or were you sort of?
No, I didn't get to New York until the early 90s. And I missed the whole Studio 54, but being in New York for so many years now, I've heard the legends and just wished I had been able to be there. I have friends that were there, and Stephen and I did a lot of interviewing people and finding about it. But no, I'd never been there. I knew the legend, and I was obsessed with it. And the more we got into the show, the more I became obsessed with it.
That's great. And I know, there was lots of development, but one of the things that's also unique about you guys, both in Hedwig and in This Ain't No Disco, and again, it sort of speaks to the fusion of rock and roll musicians and rock and roll composers in theater, is you were both playing in the band, right? I think you both, Peter, you played in the Hedwig band for quite a long time. Stephen, you initially played in the Hedwig band and then did it for quite a while too, as Hedwig kept going on. But then you both played in the band in This Ain't No Disc. You want to talk about that experience and why that's sort of cool and important to you in terms of the process?
Yeah, I'll start this. Playing in the band for Hedwig was such a great experience for me. I was in the show on Broadway. Stephen kind of called me one day and said, "You're the drummer," and I was like, "Okay," and it was a great phone call to get because I love that show so much. And when we were doing disco, when we were starting disco, Stephen and we did a lot of workshops, and some of the workshops we would play in the band, and other workshops we had, musicians and when we got ready to put the show up at the Atlantic, we by that time we had changed the show from a book musical into a sung through musical, which I think is kind of an important thing to mention. If you don't know what a sung-through musical is more of like an opera where everything is sung, even the dialogue, you know, as opposed to a traditional book musical that has song, scene, song, scene. So Stephen and I, at that point, we were, you know, writing the libretto, which is the book in a song-through musical is called a libretto, for those of you who don't know. And so Stephen and I were the libretto writers and the music and lyric writers. And we didn't, I guess, how can I put this? We had a lot, we bit off a lot. Like, it's a lot to figure out 2 acts of a sung-through musical. It was so much music, so much musical dramaturgy. And the whole show was music. Every transition had music. Even some of the spoken parts, which there weren't that many in the Saint No Disco, had music accompaniment. So I think originally the idea of us being in the band was we had so much musical dramaturgy to solve, and we had such little time to do it by the time we got the green light to go up at the Atlantic Theater, that we felt like the only way that the musical dramaturgy was going to really come together is if we were playing the music ourselves. I think that was the original idea of why we wanted to play in the band. You know, ultimately, you know, I think, if I could say this, I mean, I think we both have a tinge of regret of being in the show itself and not spending more time in front of the stage, taking in the other important parts of the show, namely the story of the show, which I think could have used a little bit more of an objective, you know, of 2 authors looking at it from the outside rather than being on the inside. But it was an incredible experience being on the stage with those amazing actors, and which if anybody's there, I just want to shout out to all of the cast if anybody's there.
Yeah. Can I just say, like, from a musical perspective, some of my first experience, a lot of Broadway pits don't really are put together in a way that doesn't think of the individual characteristics of the musician that's going to play it. Which just seems sort of a weird oversight. And so not only do we arrange and write for our instruments, but also who plays in the band at the beginning, especially with music like this, but in any music, is sort of like who originates a role. Like, if Zero Mostel originated a role, that role has Zero Mostel all over it in one way or another, you know, even when it comes back in 2021, you know, like, and so I think we needed to imprint ourselves on the original version of the score and the sound of it.
No, it's such a good point in terms of getting the character, like a great band, and like you say, creating great music from a great band, like casting that band, like you're saying, and really, which is great. And the upside for us, you know, was that we got to see you guys in concert. So it felt also in that fusion of rock and roll and theater, it feels like, wow, this is a rock and roll concert, and there are the actual composers playing it, which I think was the cool, you know, one of the cool things about This Ain't No Disco, and one of the cool things about Hedwig as well. I'm going to jump around a little bit because I want, Peter's got a song he wants to play. And Peter, before we get into that song, I wanted to give you a chance to just mention, you just started a new band with Michael C. Hall. Is that right?
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit about that before you play our surprise song.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I met Michael C. Hall, again, another one of the great, you know, things that happened from Hedwig. He was the 3rd Hedwig on Broadway, and we became friends during the production. We shared a ride home a lot because we lived in the same, we lived a block away from each other downtown. And we'd crank music in the car on the way back from the Belasco Theater, and we had a deep love of heavy metal and music that was loud. And after Hedwig ended, we stayed, you know, close, and another Hedwig alumni, Matt Katzbone, and I went on the Hedwig tour, and we became really close on the tour. I've known Matt for a long time, from when I was in Morningwood, and he was in a band called Daddy, and we just on tour we were like, hey, when we get back to New York, we should hang out. And, you know, all these theater families, you know, you say you're going to hang out after the show ends, but we actually did hang out when we got back home from the Hedwig tour, and we started making a lot of music just in the name of fun, and made a lot of instrumental music. And we were just doing it for the love of hanging out and making things together. And after a certain point, we wrote a bunch of ideas. We were like, wow, we should probably get a singer. And one day I had dinner with Michael and I played him one of the songs, and he was like, wow. I didn't even say, hey, we're looking for a singer, but he noticed that there weren't any vocals, and he said, hey, if you guys ever need any vocals. And I was like, yes. And I sent him a bunch of stuff, and he came over and got his notepad out and started writing lyrics and melodies. And this was like, you know, 2.5, 3 years ago. And now, you know, we put out an EP. Unfortunately, the pandemic came right at the same time that we launched our band, but we've been playing around New York for over a year, and I think we have our first full-length record coming out this fall.
Awesome. So stay tuned. And that is, in fact, Princess Goes to the Butterfly Museum. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's a great band.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great band.
So we'll look forward to the album. And then, so again, jumping around, tell us a little bit about what you're going to play for us.
So as Stephen mentioned, and we were both talking about, we spent a lot of time writing Clueless, the musical, which what for me was, coming from the rock and roll world, just getting to sit in a room and write with Stephen all over the country. We wrote in Kentucky, in New York, and in LA, and it was like my education. I kind of consider it like graduate school of writing a musical, because we had to rewrite the show several times, and we wrote so many different songs. But in the movie, towards the end of the movie, Cher Horowitz has this awakening where she realizes, she has like her soul makeover moment where she realizes that, oh, you know, it's not all about shopping, and, you know, I think she has this moment where she realizes that she wants to do something for other people. And in the musical version, we had this cause that Cher could rally around, which was these mudslides in Malibu, which we thought was kind of funny, that the poor people of Malibu, you know, having to, you know, lose all their, you know, mansions. And so Cher gets this idea that she's going to hold this, you know, fundraising drive in Beverly Hills, at Beverly Hills High, where all the, you know, students would show up with, like, you know, an ATV or things that they've, you know, really expensive Beverly Hills things that they found in their garages, or, you know, a pair of skis, or, you know, designer, you know, shoes. And we thought we would write a song kind of like We Are the World. We called it We Are Beverly Hills. And so that's the song I'm going to play. It's a song where every line is sort of sung by a different person, kind of like We Are the World, you know. So I'll sing it all right now.
This was years before Kidney Now. I just want to say that.
So yeah, this is We Are Beverly Hills, and forgive me in advance for any mistakes I've made. I haven't played guitar or sang in a long, long time. So here we go. There comes a time to cross the lines that divide all our great cities, and say that I'm gonna lend a dime and watch that you just bought at Tiffany's. We're all a part of it. Los Angeles, it's God's most awesome county. And when the shit and the fan hit, we'll lend a helping hand or 3 pairs of skis. We are Beverly Hills. We are the county. With great privilege comes great responsibility. We are Beverly Hills. We are Beverly Hills. We are Beverly Hills. We are LA County. And so, my friends, we're called again to reach a hand out to another and heal the pain from mud and rain that falls on our sisters and brothers. We're all a part of you. Oh, Malibu, let's catch some waves at Suma. We'll bring wetsuits and bell staff boots. They're made from ostrich leather or from kangaroo. We are Beverly Hills. We are the county. With great privilege comes great responsibility. We are Beverly Hills. We are Beverly Hills. We are Beverly Hills. We are LA County. Something like that.
Woo. Awesome. Beautiful. 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 Fantastic. Great song.
That was great. Yeah, that's a funny. You know, they had the kids in this have a very shallow epiphany. Like they're supposed to think big, like they're supposed to think beyond themselves, and but they can only get all the way to Malibu, and the county line is their heart has opened up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we found this was one of those things that was replaced because as much fun as it was when all the characters were singing it and trading lines, we needed a sincere ending. But I love that song. It was so funny.
Hey, a couple of more. And this may sound like a general question, but just because you both existed in both worlds, in terms of being heavily involved in the rock and roll world and that kind of either touring or composing and being in the studio versus the theater world, talk about that a little bit. What your experience has been in both those areas, because obviously you both have had great experience in both of those areas. What's the difference, or anything you want to say about it?
I guess I would start just to say, they're both about collaboration, being in a band and working in the theater. I think, but in a band, you maybe have 2 or 3 bandmates and occasionally a producer to work with. In the theater, you have dozens and dozens of, amazing people to navigate and collaborate with. And so it's like collaboration on acid, really. That's one main difference. But, there are theatrical bands, and stuff like that exists. But, theater, there's just, it's very addictive. Coming from the rock and roll world, I wasn't prepared for how much I fell in love with the process of writing for the theater. You've got the story, you've got the visual, it's kind of a dream world to work in, and very difficult world to be successful in. But I guess I would say, having the story to tell, story, you don't have to tell that much story in a band. You don't have to put everything into context in a band, and that makes writing for a band a little more easy and maybe a little more fun. But there's nothing more satisfying than a theater song that conveys the right story points. I hate to say it, it's even more satisfying than writing a good rock song, because it has to do so much more,
Right.
It feels like with music that stands alone, the story you write has to be about you, the performer. Like what is your background? What is your if you're a band, like, do you all just hang out together all day, and what do you do? Like the impression you should create with a band is that you guys are inseparable and you're off at bars at night, and that's what you want from your band, not just people punching a clock. You want to create, and then it's like, so when they do hang out, what kind of bars do they go to? What kind of movies do they watch? What music do they listen to when they're hanging out in their band, Fortress of Solitude or Clubhouse or whatever?
It's a tight collaboration, and that's what.
Yeah. even if it's not, you want to create that impression. I feel like with like, you know, they're very different worlds, but I feel like I think I'll always feel like there is a certain amount of theater established, like just personally for me, a certain part of theater establishment, and I mean like more hidebound audiences or tradition-bound audiences and critics who I don't even know, like I don't even like, I feel like I'm playing to the like I'm playing to the wrong room sometimes. And then there's also then there's this other half that's like, oh, thank God you're here. We've been waiting for something like that. And I love those folks, and the other I like, it's just like, you know, you're a comedian in the wrong nightclub and all your jokes die or whatever it is. Just like I don't get the aesthetic of a lot of, and that's for me, that's like, and a lot of it's wrapped up in gay culture, which you know, because there's a lot of overlap between theater culture and gay culture, and like the whole reason that Squeezebox started and where we ended up starting Hedwig was there weren't any gay clubs that any of us wanted to hang out in because we didn't like them. So we made a club that we wanted to hang out in, which is still, like, as a club, a defining place for all the people that were there. A friend from college who hung out at that club has been sending me pictures today that he took on the night that we backed up Debbie Harry. And like, there I am playing, and like the place is packed, and it's just, you know, so obviously she's not a drag queen, but she was a special guest. It was her, I think, 50th birthday or something. And that seemed really old. And but like, you know, we had to make our own place to go have a gay club because, and everyone that hung out there was like, oh, thank God there's a gay club I can go to. And so I feel that push and pull, whereas in rock, and maybe it's because you can make your rock music and distribute your rock music and play in a club kind of at almost any level. But theater, if you don't cross a certain threshold, you're literally, your work ceases to exist. Like your record that somebody hated from 40 years ago still exists. Like and someone can find it and go, oh my God, this is awesome, right? But like in theater, you actually have to somehow convince the people that you don't even know how to talk to like your stuff, because otherwise it will simply cease to exist. So rock, it's not like I have the same taste as everybody in rock music, or even every rock musician who's a friend of mine. Like, we don't necessarily go home and listen to the same stuff, but I feel like I know what I want to do in it, and I get what other people are doing, and I feel like even in the areas that aren't my thing, I get what we're talking about.
That's awesome. So because we want to have some time at the end, I think my dog's gonna bark. Hang on, my dog's barking.
You want me to shut up?
Hey, everybody.
This is the equivalent of live theater.
This is the equivalent of life. This is if it had been a leak in the ceiling, it would be a very Hedwig moment.
That was intermission right there. Intermission.
Because we have we want to have some questions at the end. We do have one more song, and we'd love for both of you guys to set up the song, which is actually a demo that you guys put out. We'd love to set that up and play that, and then I think we're going to take some questions from our listening and viewing audience, if that's okay with you. You want to set up what we're going to hear?
Is it One Night Terpsichore?
I believe it is. You want to tell us what it is and where this particular version came from?
Yeah. Is this one that we've been hearing from the end of the show?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick had wanted an epiphany where somebody sang a song based on 4 Buddhist truths, which is like a really big thing to get in. And somehow, and then when Peter and I started like exploring the character of the artist, who is an Andy Warhol-like character, but it's not Warhol. He brings in a lot of other people. We thought, like, what would Andy Warhol's 4 Buddhist truths be? And Peter had started like sending me like got the conversation going by reading the diaries and the quotes and stuff and sending me stuff and got me into that. And we really, he drove that harder than I did. I had the idea.
Diaries.
Yeah, the Warhol Diaries. And I thought that wanted to write it in iambic pentameter, because even though terpsichore isn't really an iambic pentameter, it just somehow the word called for something like formal. And so the lyrics are, in fact, unlike the rest of the show, the lyrics are really sort of biographical, drawn but varied from the biography of Warhol and things he wrote about in his diaries.
Yeah, and I'll just say that terpsichore is the goddess of dance, and I'll let the song speak for itself. The version that we're going to hear, I think, is from Chicago. So we.
Oh, it is?
I mean, at least what they played a minute ago. And so I would just say that, because I don't think this has ever happened in the theater world, but I was on the Hedwig tour with my Hedwig band, and Steven flew out to Chicago. I had worked with this amazing producer out there called Steve Albini, who's super, heroic, rock producer, performer, musician. He has a studio in Chicago called Electrical Audio. And he's a legend in the music business. And we were like, let's go do a session with Steve. We called him up and he had the time available when we were there. So we went in the studio and we asked our friend Will Connolly, who played the artist in our show, just an incredible human being, phenomenal actor and musician, incredible composer himself. He came out and did us a huge favor by flying out to Chicago and singing the song for us. So that's a little more of the setup.
Great. Then Claire, I guess whenever you're ready, let's do it.
You are rolling.
Terpsichore came in a blur. I was alone with a drink at the bar, watching the partiers dance without care, wishing I could be me, out on the floor. Suddenly, I was wrapped up in her veils, whisked off to the dance floor, safe and concealed. Spinning away, I was under her spell, cowboy boots tapping on the parquet tiles. I've never been one of those bon vivants, out at the discotheque to jump and bounce. But then terpsichore, goddess of dance, came in a blur, and I've danced ever since. So I thought, but when the music was done, I looked around to see I was alone. Nobody watching my shine is so gone. Why hadn't I danced like this all along? From a steel town, confined to bed for years. When I was young, limbs shook and spasmed like they were mine. Scarlet fever left scars on my skin, outcast alone, so I started to draw. I dreamt someday I'd dance with the ballet, but I was always so awkward and shy. Felt ashamed with strangers' eyes on me. Then I imagined that the muse of dance came in a blur, and I've danced ever since. Nobody watching my shine is so gone. Why hadn't I danced like this all along? All along. All along. All along. All along. Life is suffering and pain, suffering, life is pain, and we'll live it
Awesome. Beautiful. What a beautiful song.
Peter's got the lighter.
Great, great. So we're going to open it up, I think, to some questions from our viewing audience. That's what a fantastic song and what a beautiful demo. Thank you guys so much for letting us take a look at that. Annie, you want to come in and talk to us? Great.
That's great. Yeah. So I think we have time for about 2 questions, and I'm going to ask you a technical one first and then a big existential one. So the technical one is, what microphones and digital audio workstations are you guys working with at this time?
In this particular session?
I think so, but also if you have recommendations like of stuff that you're not using right now that you've loved, that'd be great too.
Okay, so we're both using a Neumann TLM 103s. I have all Apogee interfaces. I think Peter's got DigiDesign.
Apogee too.
Oh, you have Apogee as well. Apogee really works well. I have a huge mic collection. But everything on the Apogee level is really great. And get a good mic. These are awesome. What's a cheaper mic that's good?
I don't know. I would say this one is, I think this is around $1,200, and it's a really good one. But you also work in Logic and I work in Pro Tools, so I don't know if that answers any.
That's good. I did want to say, just in the Q&A in the chat, there's a lot of questions about This Ain't No Disco demos. So lots of love out there, and we'll figure out a way to, maybe get that out there. So here's the big question is, how has your creative process changed in this quarantine time / what are you working on and thinking about in these strange days?
Steven, you want to go first?
No, I don't.
That's a good question. I think one relationship I've had just with creativity in general is it's a real lifesaver when the shit is hitting the fan. I think, even if you're not doing it as your livelihood, just to have an outlet, whether, it's drawing or any sort of creative outlet, I think is really healing. So my go-to instinct when shit gets crazy, and shit is definitely crazy right now for everybody everywhere. I just in March, it just sort of occurred to me that I wasn't going to make it unless I dove into, songs. And I used the last 4 months with my bandmates, with Michael and Matt, to just keep each other engaged, keep each other inspired, sending music to each other, finding ways to create through this. And, maybe in the beginning it was a little bit like, oh, the world's ending, what's the point? But not really. We don't really think that way. But if that creeps in, just get through it, because the act of starting the creative process is healing. Once you get in it, it's like it just snowballs on itself. So I've used the time just in making this record with my band, which will come out this fall, and I think it's been a lifesaver. And I'm a little worried now that we're almost done with it, because there's more shitstorm to get through, I think.
So for me, when the shutdown first, the first thing that happened to me was I was on like Friday the 13th of March. I canceled, or the day before. I was supposed to actually fly to Los Angeles to do a concert of a song that I wrote last year. And all I wanted to do when I wrote the song was have a choir perform this song. And I worked really hard with Matt Duncan and Justin Craig on an arrangement for strings and lots of voices. And this choir in LA and a string quartet were going to perform it. And the concert got canceled the Thursday before the Sunday show. And I'd poured a lot of energy into that. And then everything kind of fell apart, and I immediately started saying, I need to just get back to making music, playing piano every day, going and setting up my synthesizer, really getting my studio back to where I want it. And then I started working with my synthesizer every day. And then my dad's health, he's been struggling with a lymphoma for a couple of years, 3 years, started, I could tell it wasn't good. And so we left home in April after doing serious quarantine because my parents, my dad had this sickness. We wanted to be able to go spend time with my parents. And we live in Kentucky. So we drove all the way from Kentucky to where I am now, which is in Connecticut. In one shot, except for getting gas and pooping in the woods. And there are no tolls, the tolls were all, they just took pictures of your license plates. We just went straight through. And because I knew that, I knew kind of in the back of my mind, if I let this pandemic not let me see my father, because my parents were going to fly out to that concert, I might not see him again. So we spent like 2 weeks here and then drove back and then started trying to get back into things. And a couple weeks later, my dad's health really took a turn for the worst. And we kind of dropped everything to rearrange our lives and just come here to not this house, but to where my parents lived, or where my mother lives now, and got to my dad's hospital room about 18 hours before he passed, and got to spend time with him that night and the next day. And so now, like, the kind of creative thing, I'll say this, because I said this to my sister, like, I've been running around like an idiot trying to like find guitar picks and like just do anything. I don't have my stuff, right? Like, I didn't have a mic clip. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I made my choice. And she said, what do you mean? I said, her sons have been staying with us, and there's water back here. We've been boating and playing games. And I said, I haven't been playing my instrument. I haven't been singing. I haven't been doing my art. And I made a choice at the beginning of the week. I'm just going to spend time with my mother and my boy and my husband and my nephews, and I'm going to have family time, and then I'll just cram at the very end because being a human was more. So like, I just have been not being creative. I've been being human and political, doing political stuff, but just trying to focus on being a good person.
Well, we love you, man.
Thank you so much. I know that's not an easy answer, an easy question to ask, even in the good times, let alone during this moment of loss. I think we're going to wrap up, so I'm going to hand things over to Claire, but thank you guys so much.
Before Claire wraps up, I think it is a good note to end on, which is just concentrating on being human and concentrating on love and concentrating on community in these difficult times. It's such a pleasure to have had the two of you here. It's, hearing you play, hearing you talk about your process is such a great thing. And, we look forward to hearing more from you guys musically and in the theater and in every which way possible. But it's such a pleasure talking to you. And one thing that I didn't mention, which I'll say out loud and Claire will back up. First of all, thank you guys. Thank you. And we do these virtual Fridays intentionally for free because we want to share with our community in these difficult times. And so anybody who is responding to it or feels the impulse, Claire's going to tell you about a link if you want to make any kind of donation to Atlantic. That's awesome because we are so grateful for you guys tuning in, and we're so grateful for the community that's helped us survive and supports great artists like these guys. So thank you to our audience. Thank you to you all. And Claire, I'll hand it over to you.
You said it all. Thank you. Thank you guys, Stephen and Peter, for taking time out of this very strange time to create community with us. It's really, it doesn't go unnoticed. And I was saying earlier before everybody joined, these things are actually extraordinarily intimate, and it's certainly not how we expected to spend our summer. But thank you for welcoming us into your homes, into your live studios, and be well.
Claire, can I add one more thing, which we talked about? These guys are looking at, I think somebody asked about this in the chat or the question Q&A. They are looking at releasing or making available some demos from This Ain't No Disco. So stay tuned on that because we may have more information. Am I correct, everybody, that we may have more information on that in the next few weeks? Is that right?
Exactly, yep.
Maybe not the timeline, but do support the Atlantic Theater. I mean, I'm not going to be any place where I can listen to do stuff. I have another month of what I'm calling shift vacation. But support the Atlantic Theater because we want our theaters to be there when we get to the other side of this. We live 2 miles from the O'Neill, and I've been walking around the empty O'Neill Theater complex and looking at all the empty buildings, and it just breaks my. Last year I was at their big gala, and now it's just empty. And we want our great theaters to be there.
Yeah.
Listen, in the meantime, we're going to do this and we'll keep doing it. So Fridays, come join us again next week. Certainly until the end of August, we have our lineup listed on our website. I added some information in the chat. And be kind to each other.
Can I say one other thing too?
Yeah.
Please.
I just wanted to, we lost a member of our theater family maybe 6 months after the show ended. Our brilliant musical director, Darius Smith, passed away, and I just wanted to send some love and peace to his family. He's incredible. He was an incredible performer, musician, songwriter, music director, and he's no longer with us, and just wanted to say his name because I love him.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
glad you did.
And sending happiness, health, safety to everybody for this 4th of July weekend. Thank you, Claire. Thank you all. And yeah, we'll see everybody soon, right, Claire?
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Get out
Bye.
again. Be safe. Wear masks.
Yes, wear masks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.